Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to AtoZrunning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AtoZrunning Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andi.
And I'm Zach, and you need to go to AtoZrunning.com and look for the word follow in the top right corner, and find us on YouTube so that you can click subscribe and continue trying to prove Andi right in our ongoing marital
or
issues.
podcast.
Debate.
Issues, all right. Yeah, or you can follow us on podcasts. Wherever you are, we're so glad that you're here with us. And I just want to make sure that you all know the amazing things that are happening on Instagram as well at AtoZrunning. We had an episode with Anne-Marie Kirkpatrick, and we keep talking about it because there was a lot of great conversation surrounding it, a lot of aha moments for people. And I did post one of Anne-Marie's quotes, and it's this: if you are concerned what Strava is going to think, don't Strava it. And I love that
you should probably
quote.
learn that Strava actually doesn't have a brain. So let's start there. Strava can't think. Well, as far as machine thinking.
Well, all your friends, yes. So I totally get this. I have been guilty myself of thinking, oh man, I want it to show, a little faster. So I'm going to push it maybe harder than I should. And, it's a vanity metric. We all don't really want it to be about what other people think, but sometimes we are concerned with it. So thank you for that, Anne-Marie. And Paige wrote this in response on our Instagram. Amen to this. Took me several months before I was finally comfortable with my new recovery pace last year. After that hurdle, it's paid dividends. Strava can ruin many people's training if they can't understand this. Thanks for posting it. And I want to congratulate Paige because she's been injury-free. So she struggled with some injury, and now she ran in rim to rim to rim this year. That's the Grand Canyon. Rim to rim to rim. To rim.
Back and forth and back again?
Yes. Anyway, so congrats to Paige, and thank you for that comment. So, Espy Socks giveaway. Zach is sad that other people won. We were ineligible to
I entered
win.
Myself several times.
You did not. The winners of the Espy Socks giveaway are Samantha, Brooklyn, and Tiffany. Congrats to all of you.
Is that in order? First, second, third?
Yes, Samantha, Brooklyn, Tiffany.
Okay, Samantha, you know our deal. You got to share with me half of your
No, you
plunder.
don't, Samantha. Don't listen to him. If you didn't win, make sure you can still add them to your Christmas list, or maybe you're shopping for others that are runners or just appreciate recovery and better blood flow. So you add that to your Christmas list. They're on sale right now on Amazon. So they're originally $20 for the full length sock compression, but they're right now $10.95.
That's stocking
amazing.
Stuffer caliber.
I know.
If you want to be the person that everyone envies at a White Elephant gift exchange, if White Elephant gift exchanges still even happen anymore, you should bring some SB socks.
I know. They are amazing. They're high quality. We've been using them. They're great. We'll link to it. Go to AtoZrunning.com and you'll find the link for this blog there.
All right. So in our episode today, we have one of the richest dives into training, mindset, philosophy, and practicality. And so what we're going to do is attempt to answer the question, why should runners structure training? And the answer isn't so you can be fast or something like that. It's far more in depth and wonderful. I'm the person who always loves the nerdy side of things. We'll go there. But if you really just want to know, tell it to me straight, give me the practical stuff, and don't try to bore me with science, we'll also go there. So we've got Jed Christiansen on the show, who is a mentor and friend of AtoZrunning. I could say that, but specifically me. We've been buddies for a while, and he is the driving force behind my move into longer distance running.
Yeah, he's a 2-time Olympic trials marathoner, and we're going to tell you of a really cool record that he holds after we talk about the world of running. As promised in the world of running, we are updating you on Kira Damato, which it seems that we have bi-weekly conversations about her because she's on fire and she's been racing. She ran a 5K, Sugar Run 5K, and she got her official PR of 15:07 for the win. That is Kira Damato.
Was that on the
know
roads?
The name on the roads.
On the roads, 15:07.
Yeah.
That's not that far off of the American road 5K record.
Oh, wow.
That's high 14 somethings.
Okay.
Nice.
Congratulations
Well
to
done.
Kira. So her story is that she ran that time trial during COVID times. It was her and her pacer, her training partner, I guess. She ran 15:04, and she's been itching to like legitimize that speedy time, and she sure did that. And she's not just done that, but of course she ran that Michigan Half Pro, and she ran 68:57. So she's got a lot to show for this season, and she is definitely one to keep your eye on.
If you haven't been already.
If you haven't been already.
Speaking of which,
she is going for the 10-mile record in a race that she kind of put together, and it's the Up Dog.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I couldn't do it. I didn't even fulfill my role. My role there was to be the cheesy, corny, and I couldn't even do it.
Well, it's not just her. There are some other speedy ladies in this event as well, including the 2021 Olympic marathoner, future Olympian Molly Seidel. So she will be there racing with Kira, as well as Diane Nukuri. She's 35 and she's a 3-time Olympian for the country of Burundi before becoming a U.S. citizen in 2017.
All right.
So she'll be there too, among a few others. So stay tuned for those results. That's happening next Monday.
Excellent. We've also got some cross-country update for you. We did mention that Paul Chalimo would be racing, and he did. He didn't race against the high schoolers, although I think he would have smoked them if he did. However, unfortunately, he didn't pull off the W. Here we've been talking about Paul Chalimo so much. He ended up second to Mason Furlick in it was an 8K cross-country.
Yes, 8K.
Very good stuff. So Mason beat him by 10 seconds, 23:43 over 23:53 for a solid run.
And Paul had posted that he loved the experience, that it's tough. It's part of the suffering of running to be in those wet and like terrible conditions that they were in. So the pure cross country experience for all of them.
And to wrap it up with an exciting record.
Yes.
Crazy stuff. Maybe stuff that makes us feel just a little badly about ourselves sometimes.
No, we cannot. We are only inspired.
Oh, yes, that's right.
By
We're only inspired and encouraged.
So the American Junior Marathon record went down by a 17-year-old Tierney Wolfgram, and she ran 2:31.
Oh, my.
49.
She did say she.
Yes.
2:31.
She ran 2:31.49, and she beat the previous record, which was 2:34.24, and that was held by 2-time Olympian Kathy O'Brien, and that was in 1984.
Wow. Okay, quick math in my head. What is that? 36
that's 34?
years? 36? You did say 1984, right?
Yeah.
What year is it?
I know, right? 2020.
This is exciting.
Who knows during this time?
Well, congrats, Tierney.
Yes, that's 5:49 mile pace.
You shouldn't have said that out loud.
5:49.
So all you high schoolers out there running 5Ks thinking you're something. No, I'm kidding. I'm not trying to put people down here. We're excited for Tierney.
Yes,
and
we
inspired
are.
And encouraged.
And she was the youngest qualifier of the Olympic trials. She was 76th place there. And so, yeah, a lot of great things. Keep your eye on Wolfgram.
Excellent.
Yes.
So many other things to talk about, but we had to keep it short because we've got a lot for you on the topic of structuring your training right now. All right, as promised, main topic this week is why should runners structure training? And in order to answer that question, we first have to actually address what it means and what it's like to structure training, like how you do that and what kinds of things are involved in it. And so we're really talking about, in essence, the concept of periodization, the idea of structuring different parts of your training to accomplish different purposes at those times. And that is so important. I don't think we can stress enough, in fact, the importance of understanding the purpose of what I'm doing right now and why I'm doing it now in order to achieve whatever goal is coming down the road, whether that's next week, next month, next year. And so in order to really truly train at the greatest possible capacity, to maximize the experience, we need to understand those things, or at the very least, we need someone advising us who understands those things. And so if you, or if your coach, or if you are a coach, or any of those kinds of things, understand these concepts, this will at the very least give you a lot of fuel for the fire, because we're bringing on Jed Christiansen, who I believe to be one of the modern day masters of the ancient art of Lydiard training, but more specifically, understanding the depth of how periodization works in your training, how to accomplish different aspects at different times. And he's just going to break it all down. And so we're going to go step by step. We're going to talk about the essence of each of the pieces, and then practically speaking, what workouts you're doing, what kinds of efforts you're doing, when you're doing them. This might be the most practical episode we have recorded yet.
We love practical here.
We
and
do.
the thing is, we know that a lot of people will keep this kind of stuff under wraps, especially as coaches. But we don't think that that mitigates a need for a coach to understand everything about your training. We're A to Z running. We want to teach you everything from A to Z so that you are equipped to be the best runner possible, to help you thrive.
That was really nice.
Oh, thank you.
Well done.
So periodization is part of that, and understanding what you're doing in your training, because we believe, and I believe personally, the more I understand things, the more I want to do them correctly. And I'm not going to just throw an anaerobic workout in here and there because I want to feel fast. I am really holding on to the desire for my peak later on.
At least 3, I'm counting it, at least 3 of the athletes that we currently coach have said to me or Andy in the last couple of weeks that they want to know more about the why in their training. And that's something we just really strive to accomplish that as coaches, but also just in our own quest to run and enjoy running, we have found the value in understanding our training well. And then certainly in trying to share that knowledge with others. And that's what we're doing here. So Jed Christiansen, wonderful guest. He is experienced in the sport like few people
I know
you will ever meet.
I know, because you're really getting a young guy in his 30s with like 80-year-old knowledge, because he started when he was 3. He ran his
started
first
racing when he was 3 years
5K
old.
when he was 3 years old.
Yeah.
He comes from a family of runners, and I did promise you a fun fact about Jed Christiansen.
There you go.
And that is that he has the 8-year-old American record for the marathon.
Oh, yeah.
He ran 3:37:26 when he was 8 years old.
And it should be noted, let's add to the fun fact, that he was only supposed to go halfway in that race. Like the family plan was he was going to help pace a different sibling and run halfway with that sibling and then stop. Because, he's 8 years old. No, he's like, I was feeling good at 8 years old running a marathon. Why not? So at 13 miles, he's like, I could do 13 more. And he continued on and finished.
Wow. So a lot of you would have been like, what parents let their child, when they're 8 years old, run the marathon? Well, they told him to run the half, but he's a driven guy, and you'll find that throughout a lot of his running history. So he went on to run at Calvin College, which is now Calvin University, and he then ran for Playmakers Elite, and he has made 2 Olympic trials marathon events, which is saying something. That's pretty great.
He also coaches high school, and he has coached college, and he's coached individuals on a number of different levels, from the sub-elite kind of thing down to even just anyone who's trying to learn how to run for the first time. So he's got a lot of experience on every side of the sport and is going to break it down for us right now. All right, Jed Christiansen, finally on the podcast. So I got to tell you, Jed, and I didn't forewarn you about this ahead of time, but a number of people who know you and know us have mentioned to us, you talk about Jed a lot on this podcast. Maybe you should actually have him on as a guest. And I kept thinking, yeah, I would love to have him on as a guest. But of course, me being who I am, I forget to ask you, and it doesn't come up whenever we are talking about things. So now I finally got around to asking you. Sorry it took so long, but thank you for joining us on A to Z Running.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So I feel that this topic is very in line with a lot of the things that have kind of guided our interactions, you and I, in the recent years. But before we get into the topic at hand, we do want to get a little bit of more of your running world, Jed. So you've been involved in the sport since a very, very young age, and involved in it at a pretty high level at that. So we did give our audience the background on some of those accolades across your running career. But Jed, I would love for you to just talk a few minutes about why you got into running and why you have stayed involved in running at such a committed level for so long.
Well, my dad got my whole family into running before I could even remember. And so I just kind of kept going from an early age with that. And whenever there was a thought about, oh, maybe I would do something else, it always came back to realizing that running was what I was good at, and any talent, any skill I had in any other sport, it always came back to running. And even things like, I like to eat food, but you can eat a lot more when you run. So just every little part of my life, I'm like, my fitness and my health, everything goes back to running. So, and then even beyond that, I've also felt like it is a talent that God gave me. And so you should use the talents that God has given you to the best of your ability. And if I don't, then I'm kind of slacking on my end. So I have kept up with that. And I think also being extremely competitive when I am away from racing and stuff for a while, I start to miss the attempts to, beat other people. So
I've been on the receiving end of that, beating other people from Jed for many years now. Jed, every time I talk with you, this comes up at some point or another when I'm talking, meeting other people that we both know and those kinds of things. And it's like, we've been rivals. I don't know if that's the right word. Rivals, enemies, opponents, whatever those words are, right? We've been opponents. We've been friends. We've been teammates. And we've been teammates from afar. And, so like we've interacted with each other in a lot of ways in running. And that's one of the things that's just you've always kind of inspired me with your ongoing pursuit in the sport and the competitive nature. Even, there's times where you're down, there's times where you're up and you're high, and you're just always there, and always a good one to talk to about the sport. I've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. I don't know that I would quite have gone as an enemy or rival or anything, because most of the time when you were racing with me, by that point we were already on the same team, and I don't think I've ever looked at anyone on my same team as a rival, and so that's good from that point. So
Well, I know that you don't have any plans of stopping running anytime soon, because you have run a marathon in every decade of your life so far. And I think I heard you say one time that you hope to do it as long as you possibly can. That right?
Is true. Yes. I've gone, there'll be three different decades so far. I feel like I got a little bit of an early start. And that's a record that you don't necessarily have to be very healthy to do. So maybe I can keep it up, although there's a long, long way to go. I am still trying to get back to what I'd call like a competitive form, because I had an Achilles injury for a while and I got surgery last December, and I am running. I'm kind of doing okay. I'm nowhere close to where I would want to be and what I would call like a high level. And I don't know that I'm going to get there, because I kind of have to take that week to week and see what happens. But at least I have a better outlook now after the surgery than I did before. So
definitely. Yeah. And that's, that long road, we're rooting for you along that path and the recovery especially. So what I want to try to do here then, Jed, is make this transition. So it was years ago now when you first kind of exposed me to the line of thinking that we're going to be talking about here. It was when I basically had said to myself and a few other close people that I thought maybe I was done running competitively. Like I was in those periods that many of us get to where I was just kind of feeling like maybe it was too much and I didn't want to keep doing it. And you said to me, Jed, well, you have to at least run one marathon, because until then I had not. And you said, you have to do at least one marathon. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with that. And you said, well, I'll coach you. I'll tell you what to do with that. And so that started the long road to where I am today with a lot of these things. But also you were the one who first introduced me to not only Lydiard in general and his training mindsets and philosophies, but you also introduced me specifically to the concept of periodization. I had known about it, as most runners do, as a vague concept, but I certainly had not conceptualized what that meant to actually do that in training and never attempted to implement it intentionally. And so periodization being the foundation for a lot of what Lydiard has talked about, and what, if you can kind of look at it this way, what many other coaches and training programs unintentionally take from Lydiard. It's one of those things where it's like everyone assumes that this is just the way people do things, but Lydiard was kind of the one who planted that seed in a very strong way. So we want to walk that road for a little bit with you here, especially because you were the one who brought that to our attention. So start us off, Jed, with just explaining what periodization in your training means. What is that?
Well, it's having a very planned focus for different periods of your training, like weeks or months, as you go through step by step what you need to do, and then after you do that step, go on to the next step, so that you can have your best race at the time that you want it to. And so without periodization, then most likely you're just going to have your best race at a time that is completely random and not when you want it. And you so often see people having, this amazing breakthrough race, maybe even at the beginning of a season or in the middle, and all of a sudden they don't understand why things didn't work out the way they wanted to at the end of the season. They didn't get any faster, or maybe they just even got worse, and they're like, I don't know what happened. Well, probably the answer is you didn't plan out your training schedule the way you should.
Mm-hmm. So there's certainly an element there of why it's important, which is to help achieve the goals that you're setting forward in your training. The logic behind then why different things at different times. You talked about, Jed, planning to do certain things in certain weeks and months in a certain order. So maybe could you give us kind of we're going to get into this in more detail in a moment, but kind of just the blanket, what does that in general look like when it's done best?
Yeah, so you need each thing to build on the previous thing, and very often you'll see like a pyramid scheme like that shows like, okay, you've got the base foundation first, then you go on to the next thing, and that can also help you from getting injured, because if you do certain steps before you've done other things, you're bound to get injured. And so usually, I mean, the phases from my point of view, it even starts with not even just like a base phase, but it's more like a build-up phase to be able to do the base phase safely. Mm-hmm. And then you try and do like this base phase. And then kind of from there, it could change depending on what you wanted to do. But I would go into like a hill-ish type phase that is also kind of prepping you for anaerobic interval training type thing. And then you want to be coordinating your training after that, and then sharpening after that.
Nice. So those are general. It's a good general map. But I have a guess that many listening aren't exactly sure what those kinds of things would look like. Let's come to that in just a moment. But first, I'm curious, who should be doing this? What runners, because obviously, the schedules, people don't always control it. And like high schoolers race a lot throughout the whole season. What are your thoughts?
I would say everyone needs to do this, although depending on what event you're training for and who you are, you would maybe, miss certain parts of the phases, especially for like a casual type runner. You might just basically go into that first phase and that is all you're doing, because you're just kind of trying to get healthy. You don't really have that much time to run. You're maybe running 4 days a week or something. You've never really raced whatever you're doing before. So you might not even do the whole other phases. And then also like marathon's different than from like an 800 or 5K or whatever. And it is very challenging when you are a high school, college runner and you have to peak twice a year and that kind of thing. But I think it's still very important to try to do it as best as you can, even when you have these forced schedules. Oftentimes professionals can almost, plan the schedule exactly how they want, but when you're in high school and college, you're kind of forced to do things. So,
yeah, and that makes sense. So what do these things look like? I kind of want to do this. And Andy, give me some help here if this isn't what you think the best route. Many listening are marathoners or do marathons at some point or another as a part of their kind of regular racing thing year to year. So I'm curious if we could, Jed, take a marathoner's training schedule as an example and break down what the periods are, what those phases are, and what kinds of things they'd be doing to accomplish the goal of each of those periods.
Okay, well, so marathon, I'm still hoping to learn more fully what that would look like, because the research I've done, I don't feel like it's detailed it as much as I would like. But it might also be more simple than the other ones, because I think the very first thing is, like all the other events, and no matter who you are, you want to just start out at a relatively low mileage. If you've ran before, I'd usually start out about half the mileage that you've been up to before, and just every couple of weeks, if you're feeling good, move up another step in how many miles you're running. And maybe even while you're doing that, some weeks maybe starting to add in some faster type running. So at first, you just want it to be jogging, nice, easy running, relaxed, have fun with it. But then you want to make it so you're not just running slow pace all the time. Now, some runners call this easy running, and that can be misconstrued by a lot of runners, including myself. When I do it, I'm like, there's no way this is easy. This is actually one of the most hard things I do. So I would maybe call it more like moderate hard. But compared to if you're sprinting or you're running an 800 or 5K all out, it's easy compared to that. And so I think the difference is that it's easy running and it's not jogging. Like usually when I think of easy, I think jogging. It's really easy. But easy running is you need to be running, and it needs to be a pretty good aerobic pace. And that is the first most important thing. Safety, build up your mileage. Don't do too much too soon. One of the things I've really started to understand more recently is that you really don't want to be going up higher mileage or adding extra pace days or increasing the pace if your body's just not feeling good. And I think in the past I was even pushing a little bit quick, and I know people who push it even faster than I do, but I was pushing it when I was, it wasn't comfortable yet, it wasn't easy, and I was already going up to the next level. And so what I've been learning recently is that it's okay to just wait until your body has adjusted. You can't rush the gun with, every person's different, and you just need to let it kind of flow naturally. After you build up your mileage, you then want to be at this like high, usually called like a peak mileage, which would be like the highest mileage you're planning on hitting, if you can even get to where you want to get. But you want to hold that, and you hold that, and you're doing multiple of these faster aerobic runs each week and multiple long runs each week. A lot of people, I think it's a really big culture thing that they have, I'm going to do my long run, this week. And in reality, you should be doing multiple long runs a week. I think women are supposed to be doing 2 long runs in a week and men 3. Which is another thing I just learned recently. I thought every person was the same, man or woman, but there's differences. And the woman is supposed to do, 2 per week. The man's supposed to do 3. Basically just, trying to hold that for as long as you kind of have this time. Now for a marathon, I think that's going to be the majority of what you need to race well. Now, especially if you're just like a beginner or even an intermediate marathoner, I would say that's definitely like all you need. It's more the advanced or elite pro that I am more uncertain if it should be going somewhere else. And I'm hoping to get healthy enough to find out. But for the majority of people, that is all you need. Build up and then just have this high mileage for a long period of time, as long as you can really have before the race.
Yeah, so we're talking about growing that aerobic condition, and marathon is pretty much purely an aerobic event. Arguably, when you get to that point where you've dipped all the way into the well and there's nothing left, you're probably doing something anaerobic in the end of a marathon. But so that being the case, this idea that you're doing everything that your system needs, or for very nearly everything that your system needs during this just kind of base running phase. Now, Jed, one of the things that I see so often in training plans, when you just look on, just Google online marathon training plans, and you see things like, they build long runs until about 4 to 6 weeks before the race, when they're finally doing their longest long run. They're building mileage over that full period of time. But what you're talking about here is that you should be building long before you start kind of the scheduled training schedule, so that when you begin, you're at your peak mileage, and then you're sustaining that for quite a period of time.
Yeah. And that was something, my family, when I was young and through high school, we did tiny bits of periodization, but like we had 1 month a year that we did high mileage, and it was for the whole month, but then that was it. And then the rest was more like a medium, and some it was low. And I think that was like my biggest mistake through that whole period of time, and why my high school state meets and stuff were never really that great, is my mileage was always way down, like for many weeks before the most important race, way off of what I was doing at the very beginning. And so you really need to be holding that for a long period of time. And that is something that I don't see very many people doing. And you do want to cut it down right before the race. Usually, I think it's about 10 days. You want to then drop it down to, I think, around 50% of what you hit. But that's, right before the race then. So basically, you're just continuing that right on up. And I think that you should be pretty much continuing to hit that high mileage. Even if you're not a marathon, you're doing other things, you're trying to get into like interval training and all the other stuff. You should be trying to continue that high mileage pretty much throughout the training. Now, it might dip down a little. That's another thing I'm not sure. But if it's dipping down a little, it's probably still like 90 or 95% of what you did. And I was often dropping down from the 100% down to like 70 or 60%. And part of the way you create the peak, in fact, a major way, is by dropping down that mileage right before. So then that's why you're often creating a peak way early in the season, and you're not really creating it there at the end.
Absolutely. So certainly there's a lot of nuance with, with marathoners, especially how much you do or do not need other elements in the training. So let's take more like a 5K, 10K runner then, for an example of some of what these other periods certainly should look like. So you spent a significant period of time doing this base running, and that base running does not really ever include anaerobic work. If the goal is aerobic condition, then you're spending your focus on as effectively and efficiently as you can on aerobic work. But then, especially for those 5K runners, you're going to want to transition at some point into something anaerobic. And you were saying earlier that the strength hill type of stuff is kind of like a good gentle transition. So talk to us about what that period looks like.
Yeah. So, and again, I think you can get away, if you're a beginner or even intermediate level runner, with not necessarily gain into the intervals, because so much, I think it's over 80%, maybe even 90% of your fitness is really coming from that base period. And so for a lot of runners, they can improve a lot more just by doing these faster aerobic runs than they would get out of the interval training. Now, but then again, when you're at the very high end, you do need some of this. And by going into the hill phase, what I would do, and this is the part that I'm probably the most eager to learn if I can get to it, is there's like hill, almost like plyometric exercises where you're hill bounding or hill springing up, a long hill, like 400, 800 meters, and then you're like jogging at the top, and then you're maybe doing this like short kind of sprint, and that's starting to get you ready and primed for the interval training, but you're not doing a bunch of intervals, and so that keeps you from getting injured right away. And then you're doing some downhill running, and you kind of do that circuit all over again. And so because you're starting to do little bits of speed in that, then you're not doing too much too soon. And so you want to have that period there doing that before you then move into the actual interval anaerobic repetition phase. And I think that the hills, I think, also make you stronger. They make your running form be more, more efficient. But I think one of the big things is it helps you transition from just running slow to easy pace runs to starting to run these faster times that you want to be doing in interval training.
Yeah. So you make that gentle transition so that your body can handle some of the more aggressive work. And then you're looking at certainly for the next period after that, that's when you're kind of seeing something that most people would consider a more familiar training schedule. You're doing repeats, you're doing some striding, some of those kinds of things, and that's more of the anaerobic work that we're all kind of, some of us come to love and enjoy, and Andy loves that stuff. I could probably do without it sometimes, but yeah. So after you mentioned coordination and sharpening, though, as kind of final elements before the race. And that's the part where I think the fewest of us even understand that there is another phase in there. But especially, even if we know there's a phase there, many of us don't know what that looks like. So what do you do in the final coordination and sharpening before the big race?
If I can kind of interrupt and go back to the interval thing a little bit, even with that, so I actually originally got injured with my Achilles injury when I went from this like hill phase into interval training, and I just jumped right into doing, it was like 2200s at 30 with, on like a cold day, 30 degrees, it was on roads, and I felt amazing. I mean, I couldn't believe how fast I was running. But both Achilles were kind of hurting after that. And I think I still would have been fine if I would have just taken some time off and so on, significant time off. But I was pushing through, and I think I made things worse. I know I made things worse. So anyway, when you're transitioning into that interval phase, you want to start with longer stuff first, like maybe miles, 1200s, and working your way down. Definitely not jumping into the 200s and just blasting them out right away. That is a good way to tear some things that you don't want to tear and possibly ruin the rest of your career. So even that, like within the phase, there's a proper way to kind of build through that. And again, it's also, you don't necessarily want to be hitting certain times that you're like hoping to hit at the end. You need to start out where you are and gradually get faster and faster as you go through it. But moving on to the coordination, this is something I'd never heard of before either, is that after that interval phase, moving to coordination where it's kind of like race practice. And this is where you actually want your races. Most of us previously would have felt it in races like here or there throughout the repetition, the intervals, maybe even back during the base. And it's not saying that you necessarily can't do something on occasion, but like most of the time that should have been more like this like casual race. But during the coordination phase, you're wanting to have these near race efforts, is what I call them, where basically you're wanting to run them at race pace, but on a final kick, and try to run a nice even pace. And if you're able to run a certain pace and you feel like you just couldn't go any faster, but you weren't really tired afterwards, that probably means you need something on the shorter end during your other weekly runs. But then if you are finding that you can't hold the same pace, you're just kind of dying out, that means you don't have the stamina still, you need to do something kind of over distance. So like if you're training for a 5K and you can't continue to hold the pace, you maybe the next week should be doing a 5 mile or a 10K near race effort to build up that stamina. On the other hand, if you could just do that pace for a lot longer and you just couldn't go faster, you're going to need something shorter, maybe like a mile. And there might even be some stuff stuck in, like maybe doing some extra little speed, like if you were, again, not able to hit go any faster, you just physically couldn't. There might be something going on with that. But it's really just doing more of these like near race efforts, and then trying to calculate based on that, okay, what is that you need at this point? And by doing these races, then you are conditioning your body to take all the training you've done and let it hone in on, okay, this is my distance, this is what you want to get fast at, and this is what it feels like. Up to this point, you've built up a ton of fitness, but you're not actually ready to race the distance that you want. And so you do need this kind of phase to get your body to funnel the fitness into the distance that you're trying to do.
That's an awesome description, Jed, because that's the concept, that's the nuance that is so untouched by most general understandings of training. The idea that you can be the fittest person on the planet, but you to accomplish the goal at the highest possible degree, you need to move that fitness into the place where it most needs to be. And that doesn't just happen. I mean, it can happen accidentally in theory, but it doesn't generally.
Yeah. And this is something like at this point, or even when I was a few years ago when I was actually more healthy, I was just not racing for pretty long periods of time that, like, you know, normally in the past, like my dad even is wondering why I'm not racing more. And it's because I'm trying to go through the proper progressions and make sure that, you know, I'm actually ready to race before I'm actually going at it. And on occasion, there's some race I find that's important enough to kind of stick in the schedule. But I'm trying to make sure that my important races are still coming kind of after that, and then I'm coordinating things the way it should be. So
yeah. That's rich.
Mm-hmm.
So on the whole,
and then we didn't do the sharpening.
Oh, please. Thank you.
So then the sharpening after that, and this is again something I don't know how much it really goes into the marathon. I think marathon probably you're going to need some of those longer, faster efforts. So there's probably some sort of coordination that you need to do to prep your body to handle a fast pace for a marathon, just going and going and going. But then in the sharpening, the thing is when you build up your anaerobic fitness back during that interval repetition training, you can only build it up so much, and then there's a ceiling. That's why it doesn't work to just do anaerobic interval training all year round, because your body has a physical limit to that. There is a ceiling, but for aerobic, there is no limit. So you can just build it up infinitely until your body is just not, you're too old now. But so that's why the path to gain faster is through the aerobic fitness. And in the anaerobics section, you want to get up to that kind of ceiling. But then to maintain it, you do the sharpeners during that last like 2 to 3 weeks before your race. And that just keeps your anaerobic fitness at its peak without the draining of energy and mental fatigue that a actual 400, 800 repetition, whatever workout would do to you. Because when you do those workouts, it actually can start to make you feel sick because you're lowering the pH of your blood down. It's becoming more acidic. But when you are doing these sharpeners workouts, which I'll describe in a second, it should take like 8 to 10 minutes instead of doing a whole half hour, 45 minutes. And so it maintains your anaerobic fitness without draining your body right before your big race, which you definitely don't want to do. So that's another thing. I just saw this past week on a social media thing. Someone was saying that their first race in a long time was this weekend, but they were doing a interval workout, I think, yesterday. And I'm like, this interval workout right before your race, and this is probably your big race, that doesn't really work to just do it 4 days beforehand, and that goes back to people just not having the concept of going period to period to period. So sharpeners usually start with long sharpeners, which is 100-meter sprint, I believe, and then 100-meter float. And doing that until you basically feel like you've had enough. I think you kind of start to feel a little bit sick. I still am not exactly sure how fast that flow is. I've done a few different ways, but when I have done it, I really disliked it because I did feel really sick. And I was running fairly fast still, despite these like 100-meter floats in the middle of it. It felt like the worst efficient, how do I say it, poorest efficiency race that you could ever run. You like sprinting and not sprinting, then sprinting and not sprinting for like a mile and a quarter, and it just kills you. After you do that for a couple of weeks, then you're supposed to do 50 and 50, basically, of it. So they're not very much fun, but it is definitely over in a short period of time. And so that's a positive. I am with Andi. I strongly dislike interval workouts too. Actually, I really dislike the long, faster aerobic runs too. So I think I don't like anything hard, but yeah, let's just get rid of it all. Can I just jog for a while? But the short sharpeners, at least it's done within, a few minutes and you're good. So
I gotta say, Jed, I love the sharpener workout. That feel, because that, like you're saying, like you're almost kind of feeling like sick, like, that idea of like sprint off, sprint, and it just feels awful. Like you're just throwing your system into this whirlwind and you can't find a rhythm. And but I really like that, and I think part of that for me, Jed, comes from I've long, for my whole running history, I struggle the most when I have to maintain a consistent rhythm, and I'm the most successful when that rhythm's broken up a lot. So that's why I did steeplechase. That's why I was much better in cross country than I was on the track. All those things.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Next time you should, when you want to break me, you should just throw in some sprints in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, I'll break myself in the process.
Actually, my brother Job, he really dislikes pace changes. Like he will even say for like an interval workout, repetition workout, he'd just rather do it straight through and not have any breaks in between.
Yeah.
But the reason you feel sick is that goes back to the pH of your blood is going down. It's becoming more acidic, and that's the same thing you want in your repetition workouts. But it's taking a lot longer to get to that point, and that's how you know you've had enough. Like that's another thing, is that you should always know the purpose of your workouts, and your purpose of doing interval repetition training is to lower the pH of your blood. So if you've started puking, you've done it too much. You're puking because, unless maybe you ate something too close to it, but generally when you see people puking, it's because they lower the pH of the blood too much, and after you lower a certain amount, there's no more benefit. So you just destroyed yourself and made it much more difficult than it needed to be. And it's the same thing, like when you see all these, usually it's more as in high school, you see all these high schoolers puking after they're like 800 or whatever. Well, it's because they're not trained the way they should be to be able to handle running the 800 yet. And they just lowered the pH of the blood way too low, and now they're puking all over the place. So you know that you've had enough in a repetition workout when you're starting to feel a little bit sick, you got this like weird fatigue about you, you're good to go. You don't need to do any more. If you haven't reached that, you probably need to do a few more.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking about like high schoolers, because you've mentioned a couple times, and I remember as a high schooler and even a collegiate running a lot of races, and I'd run them all out, and I would get sick afterwards almost every time. So when you're talking to a high schooler, do you tell them, like in a week, if you have like 2 meets in a week and there's only 1 or 2 days in between, do you have them run one of them like all out and then the other one 80%, or how do you navigate multiple races?
Yeah, so I am coaching high school cross country right now, and we had 12 dual meets given to us this season. So we had lots of meets. Those are Tuesday, Thursdays. So it's not even like doing a Tuesday and then a Saturday invite. It was Tuesday, Thursdays usually. So it's really awful for that. And the main way I navigate it is so in a normal season for us, if the meet doesn't mean anything, I would just say, you need to do that as a near race effort and not even go all out, and save your big efforts for the end during that like coordination period, because during the coordination period, you do want some all out efforts. You want a few of those before your big race, just to make sure you are ready to go. But you, earlier on in the season, if the meet doesn't mean anything, like if there's no like benefit, like maybe you do need to qualify for a certain time for like a regional meet or something like that, and then you need to go all out. But if you don't need to, like our dual meets most years don't mean basically squat. Every team's going on in cross country to the district meet, so we don't need to do that. We could lose every single one and then still be state champions. So there's no point in racing all out. So you should still probably use them since you've got them. You should use them as kind of like a good aerobic workout. And I typically told our students to do them at near race effort so that they didn't look too foolish. They were still pretty reasonable as far as, scoring points and that kind of thing. But it's not taking too much out of them because not sprinting at the end. But there were some occasions that we had to forfeit a few meets because we didn't have runners, or maybe we were clearly going to beat the other team, or we had a big race in 2 days. Where we would just kind of do it as a workout. So like one day I had our guys run the parts that were not in the woods at like race pace, and then the parts in the woods I told them to jog. And I told them, make sure you get single file in case the girls want to pass you, because the girls were racing, they had a competitive meet and everything, and I didn't want the other team saying something about, oh, we're blocking the woods for the girls going through or whatever. But yeah, I just had them, jog part, race part. Normally I would say it's more like a 90 to 95% effort when you're doing your race effort. But in all honesty, if you can get away with even like 80% or something, and then be able to do something more substantial the day after or in 2 days, it's probably even more beneficial sometimes. So yeah, you definitely don't want to be going all out if you don't have to.
A lot of our listeners like to race a lot. I think it's generally runners like to race, right? And there has been fewer races, and so I do realize that this isn't something that a lot of our listeners are going through right now. But I think it is really great to hear how it can be beneficial, but only to that point where you're not going 100% and making it harder to recover, and then continuing to train because we're not at our goal race yet. So
it really, if I can synthesize the conversation here, and I guess we can call this the wrap up then, it comes back to something you said, Jed, and you only said it just very briefly, so I want to highlight it. You said, know the purpose of, and this comes up all the time when we're talking about these things, know the purpose of your training, know the purpose of each run, each workout, each week, that kind of thing. And in so many ways, the only way to truly know the purpose of the training is to know what you're supposed to accomplish at a period in the training. So, like, if you don't have periods of training, it's very hard to understand where a given workout fits in the bigger scheme of things. So what we're talking about here then is, if you know the period you're working on and the thing you're trying to develop during that time, and that's not to say that every period you're only doing one thing, because in many of them you're doing some combinations of different kinds of things. Like sometimes with coordination, you're doing some racing. You're also trying to, as you were mentioning, Jed, work on those weak areas, and those can be different depending on the person. So then you're having to adapt completely individually. So knowing the purpose of your training means knowing what you're doing at a period of time and why you're doing those things and why you're doing them in that order. And I think the conversation here and what you're just articulating, Jed, is a great plunge into what has proven to be one of the most confusing and complex concepts within distance running as I've experienced it. And even you were saying, Jed, you're still on that quest of trying to truly understand. So I know different things about this. I know how they work in certain areas and contexts, but it looks different for marathoning than it does for 5K. And there's also, situations where, like you were saying, Jed, what experience the runner has and how that might influence when it's important to emphasize certain things or not. And all of this speaks to that most important concept of understanding training and understanding what we're supposed to be accomplishing in training. And I appreciate that. Thank you so much for digging into that with us and diving deep into it. I feel like a conversation can't go by with you, Jed, where we don't start puzzling out these big questions. But what is the best way to do this, and how can we do this to accomplish things at the highest level? And it's so great to talk with you about these things.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be able to talk about it and just continue to try and figure out what exactly it takes to be a good runner. And I think, just kind of leave everyone with it. It can, all that I just kind of talked about, it might even sound a little overwhelming. So if it does, I would just, again, kind of take a step back, go back to the two most important things, that build up and that aerobic base. And if you're not feeling it, don't increase the mileage, don't increase the pace, don't strain, don't strive being like, okay, but I really need to do this. No, you need to listen to your body. Just wait, continue to do it. Okay, now you're ready to take the next step, and go ahead and do that. And you'll get pretty far just even hammering in those two steps. And as you start to learn more, you can try and start to take on the next phases and get things more and more correct, with having the best race at the time that you want it to be.
Definitely.
Good stuff. Thank you, Jed.
Thanks so much.
Thank you to Jed for coming on the show and giving us all of that knowledge.
Melting your mind with running and training knowledge. It's great. So the reality of all of this is that you can hear all of that and you can say, okay, I've got it. I understand everything Jed just said. But that doesn't mean that suddenly I can just go implement it all perfectly all the time now. With coaches, training in general, it's like this lifetime quest of trying to perfect and understand the art of, if you can even perfect these things. So we know that most of the time questions still come up. And so if you feel like you're grasping those things, but you still want to know more, certainly reach out to us. Continue listening, because we'll just keep sharing. We'll keep trying to answer every question that can be answered within the 40-ish minutes that we try to answer them.
I did want to mention that the picture that I used to promote this episode was from 2014 Shamrock Shuffle, which was also the USATF 8K team championship. And the picture is of Zach with Jed Christiansen and their buddy Alex Russo on Playmakers' team. They had won that championship together. So I did want to point that out, that Zach and he are teammates as well. I don't recall
that. I know it must have happened because there are pictures proving it. This is what happens to me. I have vague recollections. However, I do know that headband I was wearing is unforgivable.
You have to check out the picture. So you can find that at AtoZrunning.com. Lots of other great information there and all the links for our show notes. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.